Hey there, I'm Sully, and welcome into the Gun Club. Alrighty, got a few things today. I'm going to go ahead and let us get wound up live here. Let everyone get on in the room. Um, Trying to do a couple of midweek streams this week, just because, well, we've had a lot of content, a lot of ongoing things, and a lot of things sort of popping in the news. And, well, I wanted to cover a few of these. Um, First off, let's see here. Trying to make sure we went out on Rumble. See if the stream picked up here. Yes, no, maybe. Alrighty. Rumble, you got us over here. Okay, it looks like we're live in Rumble as well. Alrighty. Had a couple of stories come across, and I know I looked back a little bit at Tuesday's late night live stream, and honestly, I will apologize for it being a bit of a bitch session. I just do get so frustrated when I'm watching some of the political landscape and basically them, using or playing games with tragedies or bringing up tragedies to pass some law because this would have prevented it, but we know it wouldn't. And it's one more time again. And we all know what happens. They'll pass a law that doesn't work or something that doesn't make sense. And either A, it'll get blown back and overturned and we'll play this game again, or even if the law that doesn't work stays in place, like the assault weapons ban did for 10 years, even then, the National Institute of Justice, the FBI's own research arm, said it did no good. So again, they go through a lot of work solving problems that don't exist, passing laws that will not fix things. And a couple of these cases that we've got in here really, well, made me really look at things that would change things or things that would possibly do some good. And overall, you know, we see all the time, oh, people, Republicans or conservatives or gun guys or whatever, NRA members, guns, GOA members, whatever they're going to call us, they're more worried about keeping their guns than they are about kids getting shot up in schools. Well, we all know that's bullshit. If I thought for 1 second that giving up a bunch of my firearms would eliminate school shootings, I'd be on board with it. I really would. The thing is, logically, I know that won't happen any more than getting rid of my vehicle will stop, someone 100 miles away from driving drunk, any more than giving up my right to buy booze at the bar or buy a mixed drink in public on a Saturday afternoon will keep someone from beating their wife. You can't pass this to fix a problem if it's not going to actually fix the problem. We can put up, new speed limit signs. Oh, yeah, we'll put a bunch of new speed limit signs. Did it slow anyone down? No, not really. Because the signs only affect people who obey the signs to begin with. Well, we'll make them bigger. Okay, it doesn't work. So again, I do get a little frustrated, and I tend to get on my rants sometimes. But got some interesting stuff to cover tonight, and a couple of them a little more interesting, more amusing sides. There's a little bit something here, and then I've got some Q&A stuff. From time to time, I get a lot of questions, and I wanted to take some time to cover those questions individually and really give them the time they deserved. First off, a couple notable case updates. Over the holiday weekend, unfortunately, if you haven't heard, down in Hollywood Beach, Florida, we had a little bit of an active shooter event. I'll pull this up here. The dispute started between two groups, and it rapidly escalated to gunfire, quote unquote. That's what they say. Rapidly escalated to gunfire. Now, we ended with 9 people wounded, 4 minors ranging in age from 1 to 17, and 5 adults ranging from about 21 to, I think the oldest was about 65 or so. Now, 2 individuals were arrested on site on weapons charges for either illegal weapon, illegal carry of a weapon, something about a weapon. And there are three other people who were spotted on closed circuit TV. They actually have a lot of real good video. It went on during the day, it went on right out in plain view. And a lot of the businesses down there have CCTV cameras. And so it was real easy to get a good look at who was doing what and who was involved and who was pulling a gun and spraying and praying at who, because that's literally what it was. Now, the interesting part, there were 5 firearms actually recovered on the scene, and 2 of them came back serial numbers as stolen. One was stolen out of Texas, one was stolen out of Florida itself. Now, this to me is 2 of the 5 that were found on the scene. Now, there could be some other firearms also, we don't know, but 5 firearms were ditched on the scene. Now, as a firearms owner, as someone who's owned guns for 30 years, the chance that I would leave one of my firearms, one of my wonderfully loved, cared for, taken to the range, babied, cleaned, lubricated firearms on the scene, I wouldn't. No decent, responsible firearms owner would leave their firearm on the scene. So what does this tell me about the firearms that were left on the scene? Well, quick guess. 2 of them were listed as stolen, and probably the other ones either were stolen but not reported, not listed yet, or are going to be reported stolen very, very soon, or aren't going to have good serial numbers on them. Chances are they were all 5 dirty guns. Responsible firearms owners don't ditch their guns, don't throw their guns on the ground and run away. It just doesn't happen. That's not typical of the breed. It's rare. I would say at most, maybe 20%, at most one of those was illegal firearm. We know 2 were already proven illegal. We're waiting to hear on the other 3. We know that there are 3 other individuals who are being sought who were actually witnessed involved in discharging firearms in the crowd as part of this dispute. Now, when we look at this in the setting of gun control, what is it going to tell us? Well, first off, 40% of the firearms used, 2 out of the 5 recovered. I said 40% of those recovered are stolen. So no matter what gun law, rule, regulation, or whatever we pass, these are dirty guns bought and traded on the black market. Okay. The other ones we're waiting to hear, but again, I'm going to be skeptical as things come out where the source of the other 3 was. But let's go a step further on it. These were firearms that were possessed by not the average normal CWP holder, firearms aficionado, good guy with a gun. These chances are, if they're used in a shooting or they're discharged in the middle of a shooting and they're ditched on scene when someone runs off, chances are, again, these were maybe legal guns, but in possession of someone who's not legal to possess them, someone who doesn't want to get caught with the gun on their person. 2 of them are stolen, and probably the other 3, at least 2 of them, were in the possession of a bad guy who could not have an encounter with law enforcement and have it on his person, shall we say. Maybe it's going to come back to someone's girlfriend or, boyfriend or significant other or, big daddy. I don't know. A lot of questions about that. What kind of person ditches their gun on scene? Chances are someone who can't run into a police officer with the gun in their person. Now, personally, I can go up and talk to a police officer, have a gun on my person, and I'm totally legit. I'm a legal firearms owner. So people who ditched them probably were prohibited possessors, I'm guessing. Now, that would lead me to believe that the vast majority of weapons involved in this were either stolen or guns in the hands of people who were prohibited possessors. This all kind of makes sense. And if we're following down through here, you'll see where I'm going. Those 5 guns, those individuals got the guns outside the law somehow, some extra legal, outside the legal manner. So every law in the world that we have about guns would not have stopped this. When you look at 5 of the guns that were found on scene were carried by people who couldn't get them legally anyway. They're already prohibited by the laws. By the way, there's also laws against shooting people out on the boardwalk after you have a dispute. Then we look at the fact that it was described as a loud dispute between two groups that rapidly escalated to gunfire. So, although the media has come out and said, oh, this is another mass shooting, this was gang violence, this was street violence, this was whatever you want to call it, whether it's, street gangs, failure of the criminal justice system. The individuals they're looking for, I'm sure as we come out, they'll be found to have some real interesting records and real interesting track records. This reminds me a lot of a few weeks ago in El Paso, Texas. We had that active shooting in the mall. It was actually two groups got into it with each other, and a bystander took out one of the bad guys. The bystander, the legally armed citizen who had to jump through a bunch of extra hoops to have his or her gun. So it is what it is. But it was really interesting to read up on this, and I'm going to be following the case to find out as much as I can about these other firearms. But to me, it goes to show that gun control, once again, a gun control law only affects or changes, modifies the behavior of those people who elect to obey the law. That's us. The good guys elect to obey the law. We stand by the law. We're going to do right. We don't want to take a gun to a gun-free zone. We don't want to buy a gun illegally. We're not carrying around guns with messed up serial numbers on them. Now, when you look at how do we stop, how do we address these things? Well, I want to stop them. And I think there are ways of stopping them. I think that every state needs to take a good long look if they want to do something to stop this kind of crazy gun violence, gun gang violence. First off, increase dramatically the penalties for prohibited possessors. If Joe Smith is getting out of jail and he's told by, the corrections department of parole and probation, whoever, on the way out, oh, by the way, just to let you know, you are now a prohibited possessor. You can't have a gun. If we find you with one or you get caught with one, it's not going to be a little slap on the wrist. It's not going to be rolled in with 3 other charges. If you get pulled over with gun and drugs and speeding and outstanding warrants or armed robbery, that prohibited possessor charge isn't just going to get rolled into that other conviction. It's going to be a separate and distinct significant charge. Why? Because if we could get the prohibited possessors to come out and say, you know what? I just got out of jail for 2, 3, 4 years and I really don't want to go back. And they told me if I get caught with a gun anywhere on my person, it's 10 years. I ain't going back for 10 years just for having a gun. I'll find someone else to do my dirty work for me. Unfortunately, in many cases, we find that these prohibited possessors go out, they commit their next round of crime, their carjacking, their armed robbery, their assault, whatever. And what is it? It's 4 or 5 charges, one of which is illegal possession of a firearm. And that one either gets dropped or rolled in with everything else. So for them, if they're looking at going out doing their next armed robbery or their murder or get even with whoever put them in jail the first time, guess what? There's very, very little punishment coming to them. They know that they're not going to get much more for having a gun than they would for having whatever else they're going to have. But if they're told, you know what, we're going to start treating that as a separate, distinct conviction. If you want to go out, commit an armed robbery, if you do it with a knife, it'll be this. But if you're found in possession of a firearm, there's going to be a side of 10 years that's coming in on top of that. They might think twice about it. Next, possession of a stolen or obliterated serial number firearm. Folks, most legal gun owners, most of them, we pick up our guns, you can look at our serial numbers, they're not altered, they're not obliterated, they're not torn up. Good guys don't carry guns with torn up serial numbers as a general rule of thumb. 99% of the time, 98% of the time. So let's take If you've got a gun with an obliterated serial number, and let's throw a higher charge on that. If they're already illegal, we don't have to pass a new law. Let's take one or two of the existing laws, prohibited possessors, stolen guns, guns with, obliterated serial numbers. You know what? If somebody gets caught with two guns and they both have obliterated serial numbers and they're a prohibited possessor and they get 10 years for each of the prohibited possession charges, that's 20, and then 5 for each of them having obliterated serial numbers, and that's 30 on top of what they already had. You know what? We would get rid of the market for these guns. These guys get guns on the street because it's a supply and demand, basic economics. The supply is there because the demand is there. The demand is there because people know they can go out and get illegal guns left and right. Good guys don't do that. The average good guy is not buying, guns out of the back of a car in the parking lot at 3 a.m. All of my guns for the vast majority have either come from someone I personally know, personal work colleague, something else, or bought from a store from an FFL. But these people who are selling guns out of the trunk of cars and have 4 or 5 with obliterated serial numbers on them, let's make it pretty risky to have those things around. You got a gun with an obliterated serial number, boom. Let's land on that. But unfortunately, so many of those are treated like little slap on the wrist. We roll it all in with your other charges. You're charged with 4 things. You plead guilty to 1. We roll in 3, and we close out the case. And then we give you shortened sentence, make a plea deal, and we close the case out. If we enforce the current gun laws, we could probably do a lot of good, because this is what we're seeing on the street. This is the street shootings. This is the, 9 people wounded on Memorial Day on a boardwalk because of what? Idiots running around with guns. Now, there are guns that are also used by our good guys, and there are good guys and good girls in this one with guns. First off, let's go up to Queens. May 31st, it was, I believe, Wednesday of this week, an older man shoots an armed robber. Now, this man was on his way home. It's about 2 o'clock in the morning, and I've seen the video of it. The man's walking down the street, 2 o'clock in the morning, minding his own business, and a 30-something-year-old suspect comes up and begins waving something at him. It looks like a sharp object of some kind, basically standing in his way on the sidewalk, and little by little pivots around to the point the man's back is up against the front of the building. Finally, the man draws a gun, fires multiple times, ends up shooting the bad guy in the chest. The guy was asking for money. This guy's asking for cigarettes. He's, threatening him. Clearly, the 65-year-old man seemed to be in fear for his life. The gentleman's bouncing around in front of him. The suspect was pronounced deceased at the hospital. He's got well over a dozen arrests, including some robberies and some other stuff. Now, the gentleman involved, the 65-year-old man, apparently did not have a permit for the firearm nor to carry it in the city of New York. We all know how hard that is to get, even with Bruen coming through on the Supreme Court. So basically, because he was supposed to be a defenseless victim and he did not, he's now being charged with a firearms crime. The Queens DA is also debating whether or not she's going to charge him with murder because of the fact it turned out that it was not a knife, it was some type of a pen or something that looked like a weapon. Now, again, at night, if you're supposed to be able to judge what someone's coming at you with, you watch the video, it was pretty rough. And I feel sympathetic for the man. I really do. He was illegally carrying a firearm because in New York City, unfortunately, the laws there say that the 65-year-old man should be held up by the 32-year-old. He has no right to walk that street on his way home. I mean, who does he think he is defending himself? Now, it's interesting that the family of the 32-year-old has come out. They don't blame the 65-year-old for their family member's death. They blame the city. The 32-year-old, apparently, 32, 37, I believe, has been in and out of mental health institutions for ever. The city would do nothing to help them. He had been hospitalized, institutionalized, everything else. The family knew this would happen sooner or later. The man apparently had been having a mental breakdown, had prior to this encounter with the 65-year-old broken a couple of windows on the front of stores, attacked an intercom system, tried to break into another building, pretty much having a meltdown and running amok, for lack of a better term, and comes upon this poor 65-year-old gentleman who dared to be walking the streets at night. I mean, really, how dare you? If we look at this, even the family said, we don't fault this old man. We knew this would happen sooner or later. The city wouldn't do anything to help. That their family member, they've lost their family member, but even they say it wasn't this man who killed him. It's the city of New York who killed him. It's the city of New York who left a mentally ill, mentally deranged, aggressive, dangerous person on the street for so long. And what happened? Sooner or later, something bad had to happen. And, I feel bad for the 65-year-old guy because he ended up shooting someone. And now, he's dealing with the gun charge and all that craziness. I also feel bad for the family members. They've lost a family member and they're coming out saying, we really don't blame the old man too much because you know what? It's not his fault. This was the way things had to happen because unfortunately, they left this man on the street for so long. They knew it was a matter of time. And so I'm pulling this up and I wanted to hit something on this. I'll see if I can find it here quickly for you because we really have an interesting, situation brewing in New York right now. I grew up in New York City and, well, just outside of the city, but I grew up in the area and it's sad to see this city come to this. It's also sad to see that, things had to get to this point. The article here, and it was interesting. Pull this, and since we're on Rumble, I feel that I can safely do a little sharing here. Let me see what I can do to share something. And let me see here, share screen, pull my screen to. And let's see if I can do this. Okay, so now we're going to put you, this is the old man right here, and we have the attacker right here. And the Post got this video. I don't know whether this is off of a dash camera on the street or outside an apartment building, but okay, what is this man supposed to do? Let's see here, run it. And the person running away, by the way, is not the old man. It is the suspect. So now we look at the way, and again, I can run this back slow here. You've got someone approaching you, and you can't really go left or right because there's a barrier to either side. So you back up as much as you can, and he's got something in his hand, and he's lunging towards you. Folks, it is what it is, but definitely, a problematic situation. Unfortunately, that is what we're dealing with in, New York City right now. And I hate that it went that way. I hate that the young man lost his life. They charged him with criminal possession of a weapon. He was taken into custody for questioning after he fatally shot an erratic career crook. And, one of the neighborhoods said, this isn't our nice little neighborhood anymore. He said since August 2020 article, since shuttered hotel on Queens Boulevard, locals had griped it turned into a flophouse. People now come down the block, Kia cars, they pass it. Drug deals are going on in the lobby. And so this gentleman, well, he's going to jail possibly. He's got to go to court and deal with all that. When we look at the whole situation, it's a tragedy. It really is. It's a tragedy on a lot of levels. We go through the individual who was killed, 32 years of age. You know, it's interesting when you sit there and say, well, what do you do? What, do you become a victim of violent crime? Do you give up on the city? I don't know. The gentleman had 15 arrests dating back to 2004 and a record of mental illness. He died in the street. They also found the metal pen in his right hand. He saw the victim. He was being lunged at him. Now, the interesting thing is crime within the 102 precincts, which is where this occurred, the old 102, is actually down 4% this year, but up 50% from 2 years ago. So it is what it is. I feel bad for this guy. I think he's probably a decent guy. What do you do? It's, it's sad. It's sad that one person lost their life. But when you hear that the family members say, well, they don't blame this gentleman. They don't blame the old man. Even they said something was going to happen sooner or later. So it is what it is. Now, we'll go to Little Rock, Arkansas. Now, this is an interesting one. Pregnant woman defends her family. Now, woman, her husband, their 2 kids. She's also pregnant with a third, I guess, or pregnant with another one. The attacker approached her husband. He was packing the car, jumps him from behind, strikes him repeatedly to the point he's got head injuries and also 1 or 2 cracked ribs. And then after that, the suspect jumps into the driver's seat, punches the wife repeatedly in the face and head. Meanwhile, we've got 2 kids in the backseat of the vehicle. Mama Bear, wifey, drew her firearm, shoots the attacker. Now, when Mama Bear shoots the attacker, he ends up taking a round either in the head or neck area, backs out, runs away. Later found he is hospitalized. He is still alive. Apparently, I don't know life-threatening or non-life-threatening or where we stand on that, but definitely interesting situation. So from that standpoint, it is what it is. You feel bad for the individuals involved, but I'm glad that this mama bear in Little Rock was able to protect her family. Think about it. Who punches a pregnant woman in the face and head, jumps her husband, breaks his rib, jumps in the car? What's next? I think she showed a hell of a lot of restraint waiting that long to draw down on him, but she did. And there you are. Interesting. And let's keep going because we've got more. Got concealed carry questions. Now, when I brought these together, these are different carry questions that I get as an instructor and somebody in my circle. Pretty much a lot of people know that I'm, knowledgeable about firearms, or I won't say an expert or a guru, but they know I teach. They know I teach the CWP. I know a lot about the different laws. They know they can ask me about different gun laws or policies or things like that. And so I put together some of the most common questions I get, because again, if I hear them 2 or 3 times from people individually in my circle or in my neighborhood or in my HOA, I'm sure that outside that group, there'd be some interested as well in some of these answers. Okay, one of the big ones I get is, do you think I really need to get my CWP, or should I get my carry permit, or what do you think? Do you think I need some version of this question about the CWP? Okay, now, My usual response to that is, well, what do you think? Why would you not want to? Before we even think of what I think, why would you not want to? And I know some friends of mine, associates, colleagues, however you'd put it, special needs friends, whatever, who may say, I don't think I should get it. And when I ask them why, it's like, well, I know my temperament. I had one friend of mine who very flat out told me that I know my temperament and I don't trust myself with a gun in public. To have one at the house, if someone breaks in, whatever, fine, great, wonderful. But this individual very openly stated, and it was a she, that she did not trust herself to be going around carrying a gun in public. And she thought it would be a bad idea and might end really, really badly for her to be out carrying a gun in the rest of the world, especially in associating with some of the people out there. And I said, okay, you know your temperament, your mentality better than I do, but it made a valid point to me. So again, if someone's asking me, should I get my carry permit? Well, look at some of the situations we see. Are you the type of person like this mama bear who's going to use as much restraint as possible before actually dropping the hammer, before pulling the trigger? For example, let's look at the stream we did a couple nights ago. The guy in Texas, he's being chased around the parking lot by someone with a stick. He's already gotten fractured either hand or arm or wrist trying to defend himself. Now, in my opinion, a little bit too much restraint, but is there too much restraint when it comes to justifying deadly force? I don't want, as a firearms owner, a firearms instructor, and a general member of society, I don't want somebody to be the type of person who will draw a gun over a parking space. Oh yeah, you took my parking space, so I'm going to pop around in your tire. Wrong answer. That's not, those aren't the kind of people that I want carrying in public either. Whoops, you cut me in line, or you got the last, Cabbage Patch doll off of the shelf, and my kid really wants one, so, we'll just do that. I mean, we've seen what Black Friday shopping turns into. Some of those people I don't think have the personal restraint that God gave a houseplant, and so they probably don't need to be carrying. Okay. So again, think about your conflict resolution skills. And if you don't have really good ones, or you question it or whatever else, you may be a thought of, maybe I don't need to get my carry permit. Maybe that isn't a good thing. Not to say don't own a gun, not to say you're not allowed to. What I'm saying is, if you're the type of person, do you trust yourself in public with a gun? Because if you don't, maybe that's telling you something. And honestly, I'd rather sit there and say, if you don't trust yourself in public with a gun, why should anyone else? And, if you can't get like a little handle on your chill on there, well, maybe you don't need to be dealing with that. What am I, it is what it is. So again, what kind of concealed carrier would you be? Number one. Next one is, if someone says, well, I could do it, but I don't know if I want to carry a gun every day. No one says, because I happen to have a permit, that I have to carry every day. It gives me the option to carry if I wish. I've had a lot of friends who did not carry every day. They carried occasionally, carried sporadically, carried depending where they were going, whatever else. Either that or they had intended to carry all the time, but it got to be heavy and bulky and whatever. And, they decided they didn't want to carry that extra weight around, or it got old or whatever. Okay. No one says that because you have your permit, thou must carry. It does, however, say that I have the option. If I choose to, I can. To me, that's like the umbrella theory. No one says that because I have an umbrella in my car, I must use it every time I get out of the car. But if I happen to get out somewhere and there's a massive rainstorm coming down, I have that option. Or whether I've got a raincoat in my car. No one says I have to put it on every time I get out of the car. But if I pull in to get gas and I look and it's just pouring down rain, I have the option to put it on. So sometimes if you sort of borderline on it, depending on how much time and effort and energy it takes in your state, South Carolina now, the classes are fairly inexpensive. The permits themselves are free. The state is now doing free permits. So the time it takes to do it, is pretty much an afternoon or a day at the range, day classroom range. To me, very simple. I know a lot of people who have done it in 6 hours between going through the legals, the basics at the range, and then they go get their prints and everything done, send it in. They've got that option. It's given them another option for their safety, for their family's safety. So it is what it is. Again, depending on what it takes in your state, that's, some of the thoughts. But again, if you don't trust yourself, maybe even if you have it, you don't always want to carry. And that comes into the next one. Once I get my permit, is there ever a time I shouldn't carry? Well, couple. First off, I'll tell you some of the times when I likely don't carry. If I'm going somewhere, leaving the house, going somewhere that I know I can't bring it into, and coming straight home. For example, I've got to leave here and go to an appearance in a federal courthouse, or go to downtown to the courthouse to pay my taxes or to do stuff at the assessor's office or building permits. I know that I can't carry it in their building. I know that I'm going to be doing nothing but driving here and back. I may or may not choose to carry at that point. Because again, I'm going from here just to the hockey game, coming home. I know I'm probably going to have a beer or two at the hockey game. Probably not a good idea to have a beer or two. Probably not a good idea to have a gun. So, okay. In those days, do I feel a little bit naked? No, not particularly. But again, I know me. I know my demeanor. Probably don't need to be carrying a gun. There's no reason that I can't bring it in there. Now, if I'm running 10 errands of a day and I know there's one place I can't bring it in, I'll probably have it with me. If I've got to, depending on what I'm doing, I'll have it with me. Sometimes I'll have more than one with me. Again, just depends. I have that option. But if you know you're going to be drinking, you know there's going to be alcohol involved. Booze, guns don't really mix. Not really the responsible adult thing to do. I know for many years I had several colleagues. We all were allowed to carry 24/7. We all had credentials that allowed us to carry. Whenever we would go out somewhere together, usually whoever was DDing would be carrying. No one else would be. Number one, that way when we got to go into the bar or we got out to go in to grab, dinner or wherever we were going, we didn't all have to start pulling things out and undressing and grabbing things off our ankle. Let me put the magazine here, and let me put this in here, and let me put my shield under the seat. We didn't have to leave all that stuff in the car, number one. We knew where we were going when we left the house. You know what? One gun among the whole lot of us was good for enough. Or two, maybe. But whoever was DDing, we knew they were drinking tonic water all night or ginger ale and lime. They were going to, do the gunning for the night. We were going to have our stress relief for the night. So again, if you know you're going somewhere and you know there's going to be pretty, I won't say a beer involved. Okay. If we know there's going to be hard drinking involved, we know we're going to hang out with friends and family and start doing shots of Jack Daniels. Guess what? With shots of tequila, leave the gun at home. It serves no purpose. You don't need to get involved in a lethal force encounter when you can't count to 10. So definitely, if you know where you're going, you probably don't even need to worry about it. Now, this is another one I like. How often do you really think I need to go to the range? How often do I need to train? Well, I'm going to put this back to you. If you were getting on a plane right now to fly from, here, wherever you live in the US, say over to London, and you knew you were on this transatlantic flight, and you found out that the captain and the first officer on that flight had not done any time, either real flight or on a simulator, since the last time you went to the range, how warm and fuzzy would you feel about that flight? To put another way, if you spent or if you had not driven a car since the last time you went to the shooting range, how much would you trust yourself or how rusty would you be? We drive a car every day, most of us, or sometimes, some may drive less than that, but pretty much at least once, twice a week, we're always driving a car. We're a hell of a lot better driving cars now than we were the day we first got our driver's license or our learner's permit. Why? It's practice, it's redundancy. And that's why when something goes wrong, we can automatically reach and do what we need to do. We know where the gas is, the brake is, without even thinking about it. Okay. My point is, guess what? Shooting is the same thing as flying a plane. Shooting is the same thing as driving a car. It is a typical fine motor skill that you can learn and practice and develop. And if you don't practice it on a regular basis, that skill will rapidly deteriorate. So when you think of how frequently you should go to the range, look, if you never carry outside the house and the only time you ever plan to ever handle a gun is in the house or at the range, well, maybe you don't have to go to the range that frequently because about the only thing you'll have to worry about shooting is your family members or your neighbors. But if you're going to be out there in public, potentially engaging an active shooter or engaging an armed robber or doing something like that in a situation, a lethal force encounter, how often do you think you should train? How good do you want to be? Do you want to know exactly where that gun is, exactly how it comes out of the holster, sweep the safety, and fire? Or do you want to be fumbling around trying to figure it out? Again, how frequently you should go depends on how proficient you want to be. How proficient you want to be depends on how you use a firearm. Now, I know people who use firearms for nothing but recreation or nothing but in case a bad guy comes and breaks into their house. Okay? Do they really have to be as good? No, not really. But if you're going to be out there carrying day to day, regular basis in public, it's going to pay big dividends. And again, the life you save may be your own, it may be your family member. It may make the difference in a lethal force encounter between putting around in the bad guy and putting around in your husband or your wife or one of your kids. Oops. But practice, 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 practice. Big believer in it. Not to mention, it's going to the range. Quit acting like it's a chore. This is fun stuff. Next one. What kind of training do I need? Now, depending on what your state requires, you may have a basic concealed CCW class or CWP class or something else. Beyond that, you can take all kinds of classes. I would strongly recommend you become very familiar with the legals, especially if you're in a constitutional carry state. If you didn't have to take a test or some kind of legal education to carry in your state, the next question is make sure that you do know the legals for your state so that way you can stay within the law. Make sure you know what the law is. Make sure you know if you can have a sip of beer or no sip of beer, or you can have half a beer or no beer, or whether you can carry it here, there, but not there. Make sure you know the laws about, if you get pulled over, do you have to tell an officer about it? How do you tell the officer about it? What do you have to do with that? Make sure you know all that. Next one is tactical training. And when I say tactical training, I hate using the T word because the T word kind of inspires that we're all going to get our blackout gear on and our, Kevlar and our balaclavas and go tactical. No. Think of, how well you can do reloads with your firearm. Think of how well you clear a malfunction with your firearm. Think of becoming the ultimate proficient firearms user. You go out, you've got a 10-round magazine, you fire your first 2 shots or your first shot, second one it goes click. That's not supposed to do that. It's supposed to go bang bang, not bang click. Okay. How do we fix that? Think of that clearing drill. You may have learned it in school, you may not. Number 1, tap the magazine to make sure it's seated properly and hasn't worked its way loose somehow. We haven't accidentally inadvertently hit a magazine release. Next one, rack your slide. Why? If there was a bad round that was in there, we want to pull that round out, disengage that round, and come back on target. Get in the habit of doing that tap rack drill on target, not wondering, okay, well, the gun didn't go off. Why didn't it go off? Because in a lethal force encounter, if by bad luck you have a round not go off, you want bang, click, click. That's not right. Tap rack to get right back in the fight. What about jams? Can a weapon double feed? Can you clear a jam, a malfunction very quickly? What does it take to clear a malfunction? Think of how quickly, if you happen to run out of ammunition, because let's say there's Snow White and the 7 Dwarfs go totally rogue and decided to, storm the local shopping mall. And there you've got 7 Dwarfs running around. They're small targets. They're lethal, but they're small. And you're sitting there trying to engage with these little bitty dwarfs. And all of a sudden you realize that I'm locked back at dead empty. Okay. Drop my magazine, go to a second mag. Do I have a second mag? How do I do a tactical reload? As far as dropping a partially empty mag, pocketing it, and pulling another one. All kinds of things like that you can do. And again, train with friends, train with guys at the range. Come up with ideas to, again, work stoppage drills. One of my favorite things to do at the range, my favorite things, look, see if I have one here with me. I take the little dummy rounds, the little snap caps, and I'll work with a friend. And we'll know that we're doing it. We'll randomly load each other's magazines, and we'll slip one of the little snap copper caps in there. So that way, as they're mid-fire, possibly engaging 1 or possibly engaging, say, 2 B-27 targets at about a 10-yard range, all of a sudden, they get that bang, 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 click. What do they have to do? They've got to do that stoppage clear drill. Do it on the fly. It should become instinctive. The minute you pull the trigger and you hear click, we know that's not right. Do your change. Okay? How about take and load magazines to different depths? Okay, you've got 10-round mags. We'll make it easy. We're in California. 10-round mags. And you load a few of them to 10, but you load a few of them to 3. Well, what happens with only 3 rounds? If you're ever involved in a lethal force encounter, especially if you end up engaging multiple assailants, like I said, Huey, Dewey, and Louie, or the 7 Dwarfs, or whoever you're dealing with, you're going to run to empty long before you know it. The fact of, pulling this and making it go bang, you're not going to be able to count your shots unless you're incredibly disciplined. It's sheer terror. Your fine motor skills are gone. Auditory exclusion is shut down. You're at tunnel vision. You're hearing shots go off, especially if you're not used to firing indoors without ear protection. You're in a totally new world. All of a sudden, you realize you're pulling click, 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 click. There's a problem. Okay? So, getting in the habit of the minute that slide locks back, the minute you're not getting it, going to change. Making that change unexpectedly. Maybe this mag has 3 rounds in it. Maybe that one has 6. Maybe that one has 5. And now, again, running that gun to empty, even without going through the full 10 rounds, if we're loading each other's mags and can put dummy rounds in or make it run to empty unexpectedly, that's all going to teach us what? To react to that problem, to fix that problem, to address that OMG situation in a more productive way. All great drills to do, and they're things that don't have to be expensive. I mean, you can go out and get, a couple $100 shot timers and everything else, and I'm not saying those are bad, and we can have a lot of fun with those. But I'm taking the simple stuff that you and a buddy can do on a range, load each other's mags, slip a couple dummy loads in there, let mags run to zero unexpectedly, and what? It's going to get us in the theory of, I realize I have a problem. I know what the problem is, and I can instinctively recover from that problem to stay back in the game. That's what keeps us alive. That's good training. All kinds of good stuff we can go to from there. Folks, if you've got some ideas of some really cool training drills or stuff you'd like to see me put out or share with other people in the family, please let me know. Hit us up. Give us a holler. If you support us, please buy some coffee. Promo code Valor SDS, you get your 5% coffee discount, and I'll tell you, it's amazing stuff. I'm, very partial to the double caffeinated, as you might have guessed, but the blueberry cobbler is also very popular with the ladies in our office. If you want more information on any of the stuff we do, we're on Twitter now at thegunclub.com. We're on Facebook, The Gun Club Podcast. We're on our locals community. I've been trying to do more there and occasionally put up a little private stream up there. And if you've got questions or suggestions, you can always email me. Check out our Rumble channel for all of our goodies on there. And we appreciate you. We appreciate our 2A community because you know what? It's our 2A community that we do this for. We don't do it for the money. We don't do it for the glory. We do it for our 2A community. So, folks, hope you have a wonderful day. Take care of yourself. Be smart. Be safe out there. Have a good one. Later, dude.